Alright guys, HyDra again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Quite the day of sporting action to close out this Sunday, topped off with some great CDL matches to close out the weekend as well, and some massively important ones at that. 3 series, 3 game 5s that we had, 2 reverse sweeps in there as well, some mega results in terms of the context of the World Championship, but also where the LA Thieves might lie going forward. A surprising defeat for them today, arguably given their recent dominance online, but you could look back at the major and say that maybe Toronto simply have their number right now. Who does this benefit going into the major, knowing the curse around being undefeated in qualifiers? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. And let's just get right into it then, because in the context of the World Championship, this was the most important game today, was Cloud9 versus Minnesota Rokkr. Minnesota Rokkr, since the addition of Kenny, had looked significantly better, I would say. I mean, look, they were still going game 5, round 11 every single series they played, but I think they'd shown more promise than they had with Paul. Kenny seemed to some degree revitalized, playing a bit better, starting to get the best out of these guys. The issue is that a similar problem for the Rokkr that they've had over the last few years seems to be rearing its head here yet again, and that is the ability to actually close out a dab series. Because today, I mean, look, they were looking like DeChambeau at the Masters. I know loads of you guys were watching the golf today. I can't believe my eyes. Like, it was a roller coaster of emotions this evening watching that for 5 hours in a row until this time in Europe here in the morning. And I mean, like, I like all of the guys involved. Bryson, I mean, I don't want to roast him for the collapse, but he did have a bit of a miserable day. Would have been easy to say Rory, but of course in the end he actually won it. Wow, what a day. But anyway, Rokkr pulled that off. I mean, on some level, they were missing putts at 18 like Rory McIlroy today, and then eventually he sunk the final one. Oh my god, still can't believe what I watched this evening. But anyway, Rokkr, they were in prime position to win this map. The first map, Estriel, Kremp both pumped off, but it was Rokkr that got the win in the end. And then game 2, that we went to a rewind, search and destroy. Really enjoyed watching this one. I'm glad that we've got it back. You can't really be letting Simp clutch this up. I'm not really sure, what they were thinking there. I don't know how Simp managed to pull that off. He had some great moments this series as always, but in the end, it didn't really matter. Geo dropped a donut, but Nero went 16-6 for the dub, and a big game really for Rokkr in search, because this has been the game mode where they have been struggling. You might still expect them to struggle, but Nero had a real pop-off map, so did Sib, but it wasn't enough for Cloud9. So Rokkr go up 2-0. Cloud9 looked pretty shell-shocked. We know that this team, well, we at least think that this team might be somewhat broken. They were going to make a roster change for Capsidel for Attach, possibly. They decided not to do that in the end. So who knows where Cloud9 currently sits. The issue is for Rokkr is that with all the advantages in the world, they found a way to throw away the series. They lost the control. They won the game for them. This is big for Cloud9. I mean, maybe this could be a catalyst for them to get back into the season, because they've now overtaken the Minnesota Rokkr in the World Championship standings and moved up into 9th place. But this game 4 was a map that Rokkr for sure will feel like they should have closed out in hindsight. I mean, they've had multiple opportunities already as this new team to do exactly this, and they squandered it again. Look, C9, they've shown a lot of promise. It was not that many weeks ago that we were considering C9 to be in a real top conversation, and Sib is still one of the very best players in the game. But to lose this map from here is pretty much unforgivable, really. I mean, look, Kenny gets caught off guard, shot in the back. I mean, that wasn't ideal. Mack makes the play. Nero gets caught out as well here. He's in absolute no man's land, and Cloud9 break in and somehow find a way to win this map. Like, there's just no way that Rokkr should have lost this map from here. And even then, you go to a game 5, maybe you trust in your search and destroy to some degree, but it didn't work out in their favor either. So yeah, mind-blowing game 4 to lose if you're Minnesota Rokkr. Can't let that one be slipping away, and that's exactly what they did, and they go to 5 with a real tough task on their hands. There was this moment as well, actually, a couple of moments, I'll just share this one real quick, where Attach had a 1 versus 2. He tries to come around the corner and get the kill, gets killed by Estriel in time, which I thought was a mega play, honestly. But, so yeah, Attach couldn't get the 1v2, but in the end it didn't really matter, because we go down to the wire, and a 1v1, Estriel versus Attach, and who better than Attach to clutch up the 1 versus 1 to close out the series. We always talk about Attach never losing his ones and stuff like that, and he's been under some pressure lately, but this was a serious rounds to close out. So Rokkr collapse in a devastating reverse sweep, really, and they've now played 4 series as a team. They've won 1 of them in a game 5 round 11, they've lost 2 in a game 5 round 11, and they've now lost 1 in a game 5 round 10. So it's a horrific start for Rokkr in many ways. I think there's still a lot of potential here, and even though the CDL standings for them are not looking very pretty, they are one of the teams that I think actually could make more of a run at a major. I think they've got the potential to make something happen, and there's still a fair bit of time left for them to do so. But as Kenny says, played terrible, it was unacceptable, got to close out these map 4s. I don't want to say that there's been a bit of a honeymoon period over there, but it does feel a little bit like they started real well, and then they've been struggling for a little bit now, and then they choked it all away in the end, and, you know, they couldn't clutch up like McElroy in the playoffs. So happy that Roy won that as well, by the way. Like, that is what sport and, like, emotion, and it's just all about as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, Kremp said, it's living rent-free in my head this evening for sure. Anyway, so Kremp says, yeah, we won 3-2, little reverse sweep. I know that some of you guys want to hear about the golf, so let's just forget about that. Kenny says, appreciate the support as always. We'll get it together. But these were the overall series numbers, right? So Cloud9 took a 3-2 win. Kenny 0.99, Nero 0.89. You know, tough one for Nero on some level just because he had such a good map too, right? He ended up plus 10. So for him to finish negative there, and the game 5 was not a great map again for Geo. I mean, look, Geo is a top tier player in terms of pure talent, but this series and that Geo versus Sib matchup, there was really only one winner. Game 2, Geo had 0 kills. Map 5, he had 4. So he ended, what 4 in 16 in the series in Search and Destroy. That's pretty unacceptable when it matters, right? If we look at the CDL standings as it presently stands before the Thieves series versus Toronto gets updated, Rokkr sitting at 100 points now behind Cloud9, still 30 points away from OpTic, Heretics, Boston. So Cloud9 will be feeling pretty happy about that win today. Certainly with the run that they can now try and make, maybe this is going to help them get over some of the difficulties of the capsule attached drama that we've seen over the last few days. Should it really? I'm not so sure. A Cloud9 back to being good enough again? I'm not so sure. Just think Rokkr collapsed today when it mattered, and now are 10 in 17 in their matches so far this year. A decent run in a major changes all that, and there's still 2 majors to go. So it's far from over for Rokkr, but their matches have been, and to be fair, continue to be, not that hard. I mean, if you look at their completed games recently, they've played OpTic, Boston, Ravens, and New York. It's not exactly the toughest run you're ever going to find. And their upcoming games are also, well, you'd think that they were doable, but next weekend they play Heretics. That looks like far from an easy game as it stands. Then after that, they play Falcons. You'd think that'd be easy enough, but right now, not so sure. Gentlemates should be a win, and then it's Toronto, Ravens, Surge. So you look at their run and you think it's definitely doable, but who knows at this point if they keep losing in that manner. The second series is pretty fascinating as well. Yet another reverse sweep. We don't get many reverse sweeps nowadays. I feel like we used to get them all the time. There was always like one a weekend anyway. But yeah, this season there hasn't been all that many. But it ends up being like London buses, right? We get 2 in a day because Ravens take the game 1 against Seattle. Surge, great map here from Slasher and Tej. You know, working their magic against a pretty young team. Slasher was making moves. They then went on to win the Search and Destroy as well on the Hacienda. They closed out this round and it was looking all rather good. It was like, where is Surge? This team that we expect to be the serious contenders potentially in the league that Ravens are not necessarily. But from this moment onwards, this is when the Ravens team, they collapse. I mean, look, obviously going to be talking about the Rokkr a little bit more, just because they're on the bubble of making champs and the Kenny storyline is a big one. But Ravens deserve similar criticism for the way they collapsed in the rest of the series. I think especially around the situation, frankly, with Gwinn, because this game 4 was a disaster class for Gwinn. I know that it is a good map for Surge, and Neptune was fully taken over, as with Nastie, as we might well expect. But it was still a map that will be a tough one to take for the Ravens, because that was the rumour, right? That potentially Kenny was going to come in for Vivid. That they were, I'm pretty sure they scrimmed without Vivid on a day, at least. So, you know, I think he knows what the situation potentially was there too. And when he has a series like this, and you get reverse swept in this manner, it's difficult to imagine that things are easily going to be kept on track going forwards, because they eventually close out the series to Surge. As TJ says, GG, Surge lost 3-2. Not really that much more to say. But as I say, that game 4, Vivid went 12 in 28 for the loss in the end. I know they nearly got 100 point clubs, and Gwinn didn't have a good map here either. Nastie had a 2.3 KD, which was kind of unreal. And then the map 5 was a Neptune masterclass, and Ravens got smoked. I think this was the problem to me because it was a dealership search. Ravens are all right at that. And, it was a map that I think they would have expected to at least put up a fight in, but they pretty much got slammed. Slasher was pretty funny because he had 2 kills, but so much damage. Nearly the most in the lobby apart from Neptune. But Vivid goes 1 in 7 on the game 5. It looked like the team was pretty mentally compromised on the final map of the series. And that is obviously a problem when we are talking about a team that was on the verge of making a roster change. And maybe this could be one of the series that pushes them over the line. Again, the reason why it's not as big of a talking point as Rokkr is that they're comfortably going to make champs, but they could maybe get better than where they are. That is how it looks at the present time. But here we go then, the final series of the day, and one that I was massively looking forward to. The Scrum champions battled off against each other. It used to be OpTic, the Scrum champions, but over the last few days it was clear that Thieves and then potentially Toronto took that crown. Thieves were undefeated online in the most recent 12 series that they played. And this could prove to be the most important series that Thieves ever play. We know that there is a curse when you go undefeated in the qualifiers of winning the actual major itself. And maybe this is a tactical defeat for Thieves. I don't think they're ever seeing it that way. But Toronto have been very impressive as of late. They beat FaZe just the other day, it still feels like. And now they've come out and beaten Thieves as well. I guess it was a big question after Major 2. Surge, they made it all the way to the finals, and then they got 4-0 swept. Will Surge ever make it back to another finals for the rest of the year? Look, they're very competitive, but I think you could argue that Surge, in terms of where they can be with their current team, have peaked. Don't know what you guys think about that in the comments. I still think they're rather good, but are they good enough to go the next step? You know, maybe we'll look back on Surge's year and say maybe that was their chance to win a major. Whereas Toronto could be, their chance is still to come, right? I mean, they made it all the way to the 3rd place, right, at the most recent major. They seem to be getting better and better. As I say, I've told you guys for a very long time now that in practice and everything, this Toronto team is really difficult to beat. And we saw the other day they forfeited their series against Boston because of internet-related exit lag, drama and stuff like that. And in this series, well, they took advantage of the Bell Fiber, baby, because, well, look, it's not like Thieves played perfect COD. This was arguably a potentially winning moment here, but HyDra, that's number 2 on the minimap, makes certainly an interesting play to close out the game because, you know, he goes for the chow down here into the second, eventually goes down. Not ideal, really, to go for old time there when they weren't going to win off it anyway, and then there was simply no numbers on the new hill to actually stop Toronto getting over the line. Thieves then bounced back. They won the game 2, was pretty impressed about that from their side, and I think it was always inevitable here that this series, if it was going to be a close one, you know, it was going to go down to the wire. I think that was pretty much expected, frankly. And that's what happens. Thieves ended up winning the Surge, bouncing back in the game 2. Game 3 was super competitive. In the end, Thieves took it on the vault. We know their control is very, very strong, and that's what they delivered again. But it was another double hardpoint victory for Toronto Ultra. Their respawn, I mean, we know that Thieves' respawn is looking real good, but they won both hardpoints here to take it to a game 5, and it was, let's just say, a dramatic game 5, to say the very least. It was a dealership search and destroy. Pretty banging map, actually. Like, we've seen a lot of it lately. The pros were criticizing it at first, but man, I prefer watching this to Vault, that is for sure. And in the end, it was Scrappy found himself in a 1 versus 3. He goes down, and quite the storyline from this series, right? Okay, Thieves lose to Ultra. Again, it seems to be a series that they're having difficulty with. Of course, they got knocked out of the major by this team. JoeDeceives versus his former franchise. Beans versus Scrappy, because effectively, you know, Scrappy left and Beans was the replacement, right? So the idea that Beans could beat the team that Scrappy left to, that's also a big talking point too. Inside CleanX don't really talk any trash, but the same thing kind of applies for them as well, with their former teammates Scrap and Envoy now on this new team. So again, it's not a major like it was before, but it's still a big moment, and this was Beans understandably giving it large to the cameras. And there's JoeDeceives having won the series again. I mean, that's a pretty cursed image, I'm not gonna lie. So these were the numbers to end out the series. CleanX with a masterclass with 121 kills. Very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.